should really wait to hear what I have to say before you stand and clap. We'll see how it is at the end. Really grateful to be here. Tim and I, we've gotten to vacation together at Cape Kauai. That's where we really got to know each other's families. Good time with Kanakuk. And I love Wichita. I love the work that this church is doing in Wichita, and I'm grateful to be with you today. So I get a chance to lead in a lot of different capacities. At home, we have 6 kids. This is our month where the oldest and youngest both jump in age, so we'll be, at the end of this month, parents of 4 through 15-year-olds. So we got driving and occasional bedwetting still going on. Not from the same kid. I've been married to my wonderful wife. We just celebrated last night 20 years since our first date. So pretty fun. She's at the Sedgwick County Zoo. I'm grateful she didn't leave me locked up there. I get to lead in business. So right now we have 170 restaurants across 15 states and somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 employees, depending on the time of year, that work for us out there. I get to lead in the community with the Greater Wichita Partnership and Economic Development and some nonprofits, and then also get to lead higher education in the state of Kansas right now as the chair of the Board of Regents, which has got Wichita State and KUK State and all the community colleges, tech schools under it. And so just find a lot of opportunities to lead. And so I'll try and reflect on that and my reflections on leadership, which Tim asked me to share about. And I think I'm going to just change this up based on kind of how I'm feeling in this moment. So I thought it's best for you guys just to hear a little of my story, how did I end up where I am here at age 44, and where were the crooks and cranks on the road to this spot. Also want to recognize my sister made the effort to be over here, Rebecca, Becky in my world. So she's seen it all firsthand. And can tell you what's true or not if you want to know after it's all done here. But I grew up in Wichita. Grew up in the restaurant space. Grew up in a family really that could kind of built up the business from the ground floor. My mother grew up poor. Her and her brothers and sisters all sleeping in one room in the living room, connected to her parents who were sleeping in the bedroom. To my father, growing up poor in Minneapolis, his dad had a bunch of back surgeries and lost the family farm, and they were making it through, and it was their church that would drop off groceries, someone in their church, they didn't know who, on Sunday nights to help them get through the week with enough food. And so my uncle heard about Pizza Hut, and the third Pizza Hut was in Hays, Kansas, and it was a high school classmate of his and not the smartest guy in the school. And he found out how much money he was making, and my uncle was a teacher in Great Bend, and he said, maybe I should try restaurants. So came to Wichita, met the Carney brothers, and then drove up through Minneapolis, Kansas, raised money from the 3 people in town with money, and literally built their first Pizza Hut in Coralville, Iowa, back in the 60s. And they parked a pop-up trailer next to the payphone at the campground. That was the phone number they gave the bank for their loan. And really went from there. So that's the roots of our business, right? And my uncle ended up as National Director of Operations after a while. That's why we're headquartered. He came back to Wichita, and then after he left that, started opening Pizza Huts with Becky and I's father. And the rest is history. They started Carl Sekeli's in '81. And so that's what we grew up around. My sister's first year of life, my dad tell you, he spent 54% of the nights outside of the home, building restaurants, running restaurants there in Virginia, Iowa, Florida. They were all over the place, not in Wichita at that time. And so we saw the sacrifice that it took to build that business. And our mom and dad would run those Pizza Huts by themselves sometimes, just the 2 of them. And so we always grew up with a deep appreciation for the work that was being done in the restaurants, that all the opportunities that were afforded to us were because of the great work, the hard work that people were doing in the restaurants and that people had done before our time. So we grew up with this sense of gratitude and also this modeling of giving back and trying to be generous back into the communities we're in, because we had benefited from the generosity of our communities at different points. So I've got raised in this really awesome family, this cool family. Mom and dad still together. They just celebrated 50 years married. And And so I went to college at Baylor University. We just kept our basketball coach, and so I got my Baylor socks on today. He almost went to Kentucky, so I was celebrating that. Had a great experience there. I was student body president 2 years and got introduced to the National Prayer Breakfast, to the National Student Leadership Forum while I was there. Had a real tumultuous first term as president. Had groups that were trying to take me out, get me impeached. I woke up one morning and there was impeached John Rolph flyers all over the whole university, and ended up having just an incredible senior year. But while there, that was where I first started to understand one of the key mindsets for me in leadership, which is that leadership is influence and not position. Because I had seen people with position inside the university, position inside student government, my fraternity, wherever, and I was realizing, well, that doesn't make them a leader because they have that role. And I'm actually seeing some people lead who don't have the title, but have the influence. And that was a challenge for me in places where I had titles or didn't have titles, to learn what's it really mean to lead, what's it mean to have influence. And I started to reflect on my own life, and this has only gotten truer the older I've gotten, which is the people who've been most meaningful in my life have had influence in my life. They've won influence in my life. And when I think about what life's all about, we oftentimes think it's about what we do in life. I was really lucky kind of in that age to have that begin to get unlocked for me. And I went and spent a year in Washington, D.C., being discipled and getting to serve student leaders all across this country. And I got to see this idea of leadership being influence and opposition in even more spades. But you start saying, well, what's life all about? And I'd be around people that started a company from nothing. It was worth $300 million at the time. And they say, you know, I've done nothing of significance in my life. Or I've done things that are successful. I've done nothing that's significant, is the way they framed it up. I was like, well, what's that mean? And I was realizing too that I'd been asked, and I do this to my own kids now, well, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? And then what do you want to study in college? And now I was coming out of this 1 year in Washington and saying, well, what do you want to do? And I was realizing that I had thought my life was going to be made up of what I accomplished. That was what was going to be the impact. And what was true was it was who I was going to become while I was doing whatever I was doing, right? And so this idea of being a human being instead of a human doing. And when we look back at our own lives, and because our company's been around as long as it has, I've gotten to be around a lot of retirement parties, seen a lot of career arcs. I've been to a lot of funerals. And usually people aren't talking about at the retirement party, man, you remember that labor number I hit in the second quarter of 24? Highlight of my career, right? Our food cost numbers in 2023, you know, it wasn't those things. It was always the lives that people impacted, right? It was the people that had impacted their lives. That's what they're talking about. And that gave me something to focus on, because it was in that time in Washington that I realized I was doing everything in my life because I was supposed to, right? I was supposed to do well in high school. I was supposed to go to a good college. I was supposed to do well in college. I was supposed to get a career. I was supposed to find a wife. And I realized a lot of people that were ahead of me, as they were hitting midlife, they were waking up and looking in the mirror saying, who am I? How did I become this person? I don't even like who I'm looking at, right? And so that set me off on this idea, okay, I want to think about who I'm becoming. And so prior to that, I'd studied film in college. I was going to light the world on fire. I was going to make films that told the truth, that drew people to truth. People used to gather around the flickering of the fire to hear stories. And now they were gathering around the flickering of the projector, and nothing was going to stop me. And I remember my dad, we were walking into a Wichita State game when I was back for Christmas one time, and he's like, hey, man, I just don't know. Hollywood people are your kind of people. I don't know if that's really where you want to go. I'm thinking, man, this is going to be awesome for my Oscar speech. My dad tried to talk me out of coming here, and I still came, and here I am. But when I was in Washington, and you start letting go of this idea of what I'm going to do, the dent I'm going to leave in the world being what makes me matter, and recognizing that I'm loved by the Father, and through that love, I'm able to love other people, and that's what's going to be meaningful. It unlocked a lot of things for me. I didn't have to go to Hollywood to make a difference. That's not a passion for it, and I liked it, but I realized, man, I lived with 7 other people. One of them goes to church here, Micah Durr. And we were living together, and I realized, man, I thought I was pretty good at loving people, but I'm not very good at loving people. And I'm getting up every day because I'm supposed to do what because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I had someone ask me at dinner one night, well, how do you know when you need the Lord? I made up some answer. And I realized, man, I don't think at this point I really need the Lord. Like, I'm pretty independent. Like, I've figured out how you win in Christianity. You do your quiet times, you don't drink, you don't cuss, you don't go with girls who do. And I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. If any other 3s on the Enneagram out there, performers, right? A guy looked at me once, he goes, you're like a dog, man, you love to be pet. I was like, I don't know if anybody's pinned me better than you in that. And so I figured out how to get pet, how to get the snacks in the Christian world. Didn't drink in college, and really probably my approach pushed more people away from Jesus because I was very proud of that and got celebrated. And I realized, man, okay, I want to be about a higher purpose. What is the Lord inviting me into? He's inviting us into this family of love. He's inviting me into receiving love, and he's inviting me into sharing love. And there were some scriptures that really impacted me, in 1 John, where he writes that if you say you love a God you can't see and don't love the people who you can see, you're a liar, right? And in the leading up in that last week of Jesus' life, in John, he talks about love one another. This is how the world's going to believe that I was sent by God, is by the love you have for one another. I was like, man, I don't get that. Like, I don't live that. I am probably standing in the most sinful place in front of the throne of God that you can be, which is, hey, I earned it. I'm here. I didn't need you. You got me started, but I got it from here. And so I was like, I got to change my approach. So Hollywood can wait. I've got to get better at loving people. And a mentor out there challenged me and said, hey, learn to love one person. I can ask you how you're doing with that. Pick one person. I'll ask them how you're doing at it. Your friends will you'll have a better idea. I know you're excited to go back to Kansas, love Wichita, but pick one person. And so I picked Becky and I's dad. I said, okay, I'm going to get in business. I'll learn business, which would be great. I moved in his basement, and I'm going to practice loving one person and see if that makes me better. And also thought, well, it's going to be pretty cool because I'm really going to change my dad's life too, because he's going to get this incredible love. Well, the impact was on me, right? Coming into the business and trying to humble myself to be supportive of my dad, not to try and usurp anything that he did, to try and stay reconciled with him, and practicing that, it changed me and made me even more excited about being a human who's becoming, not a human who's doing. And really inside of that, I was able to let go of this Hollywood dream and say, I feel called here to love my dad, to serve this business. I used to get to work with Ray's wife and Ryan's mom, and just try and serve. Well, after 8 years inside the business, I was coming up on 30, and it was starting to be really weird for people that the heir apparent being in the business but not committed to it long term was a problem. People didn't know, like, are they going to have to sell the business? Like, I don't know if John's going to be here. And so I made a decision to leave the company, just because I was like, I'm not a business guy, right? And I've now since learned I'm dyslexic, I'm ADHD, like I didn't learn like other people. And so that's where I gravitated towards the creative stuff. As I was getting involved in the community, politics were starting to become more interesting to me. And so I actually my wife and I went to 12 mentors and friends and said, hey, is John a politics guy or a business guy? And they all said, well, you're way more wired for politics than business. I said, okay, if that's true, I'm going to leave. I'm going to run for mayor. And I'm going to call you back, and I want you to pray about it for the week and let me know. And I called back 11 out of 11, said, you're a politics guy. I said, okay, we're going to run for mayor. The 12th guy I couldn't get a hold of. Went and had a really hard conversation with my dad that I was going to leave. It was in the Jabara parking lot. I'll never forget it. He was very hurt. Probably the toughest conversation I've ever had with him. And so I was headed driving home to put our house on the market to move out of Bel Air into Wichita. And that 12th person called back and said, hey, I think you're really going to regret this. And I think you're asking the wrong question. I don't think God pigeonholes us as a business person or a politics person or a pastor person or this or that, right? He looks at all of us and sees our gifts. I think the question is, where should you use your gifts right now? And I see you as a leader, and you should be asking, where should you lead right now? I think you should be leading in business. And I said, dang it. I knew that it was about the right question. I'll tell you, so much of life is about finding the right questions and not finding the right answers. And so I went and we called those other 11 people back and said, if I change the question, I'm a leader, where should I be leading right now? Business or politics, what's your answer? And they all said, well, business. And so I made a turn and decided to stay. And I went back. It had been 6 months since that conversation with my dad. That process went on a prayer retreat, and the Lord really spoke to me through some scripture in Isaiah about doing new things. And I came back and said, hey, I want to stay, and I want to find a path to take over. Let's create a 2-year plan. And 40 days later, they put me in charge. And that was 2011. And so that's how I found myself in business. Like, I didn't take any business classes in college, right? And I was sitting at Baylor in their business school back for a visit, and I realized, man, I got people around me that know how to do what the kids are learning in marketing or advertising or management. Like, the creative, different way of thinking that my dyslexic brain brings to this is actually part of the value that I bring to this business. And being able to select a team and build a team. And so our company had great success in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. We'd gotten to a place where a lot of the success was in people's rear view mirrors as they were nearing retirement. They weren't driving. And so over the next 5 to 6 years, really turned over the leadership team into a group that was ready to move forward. And inside of all that, like, I was flying back from Kansas City last night, and I was looking, it was right at sunset, so you could see the rivers really showed up. And I was looking at the twists and turns of a river and thinking about what people think success looks like. And it looks a lot more like a river than it does a straight line, right? We think it starts on the bottom and goes up, but really it's kind of this squiggly line, and you're like water just trying to find your way back to the ocean. And so we just crossed over 10 years last month. In 2014, we had to close down 17 Carl's Kellys in one day. It was over 300 jobs, almost 400 people lost their jobs. And that was when I got in. I'd tried for the previous 2 years to revive all those restaurants, to bring that concept back to life, and it had stuck in some restaurants and not in others. And you can imagine, if any of you guys are second generation or third generation in a family business, you feel the weight of carrying the banner. And I'm like, I'm going to be the kid who came back and ran the business into the ground. That's how I'm going to be known my whole life. I took this risk going in the business, but I knew if the business was going to have a chance, we had to make that cut so we could garner resources towards the future. And so I had another mentor told me success and defeat test men in different ways. Think of it like a 2-liter bottle. You can test how strong it is by crunching it down. You can also test how strong it is by filling it full of air. And that was the time I was being tested that way. What was important inside of our business, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we talk about it, but we knew who we were. Like, we were a company that I like to say has soul. We knew the kind of people we wanted to be and the kind of people we wanted to become, so that helped us know how to treat people on the way out. Now, most restaurants, like you show up to work and the door's chained, there's a sign on the door saying your check's in the mail, and that's about all the notice you get. We tried to give teams reasonable notice. We paid severance in towns we knew we'd probably never go back to, just because we felt like it was the right thing to do. And we were fortunate enough still to have enough resources to make decisions like that. But then our business journey from then, when you get into 2016 and 2017 and so on and so forth, we've just been blossoming, right? So we created Homegrown in 2017. Number 10 opens for us on Monday. We got 5 more in the ground. Yeah, thank you. We've grown our Applebee's portfolio from 25 to 140, and gotten into some other brands. So we essentially doubled in 2020. We doubled again in 2022, and it's been awesome. And around that transition point in 2017, we changed our name from SASNAC, which many of you may have known our company as, which is Kansas spelled backwards. Sounds like insurance or a vending machine or something like that. My dad tell you it's the only business he let his brother name. We changed it to Thrive Restaurant Group. And so this is where, the heart begins to show through inside the business. Because our team wanted to be an exception to what the industry generally is, which our industry is known for using people up, chewing them up, being hard on families, and spitting them out, right? We said, well, how can we be a place where people have the opportunity to thrive and flourish? How can we be one of the exceptions inside of this industry in that way? And so we changed our name. It was bold in the sense that it was out there for everybody to know what our goal was, and they can tell us the truth, and they do tell us the truth of when we're hitting that and when we're not. And I'll tell you, ever since I came back in the business in 2002, I was trying to figure out how to talk about servant leadership. And so I do presentations on the upside down pyramid, and we changed our vision and mission statement to try and reflect that, but none of it was really sticking. It would work. It'd be like I'd talk here, everybody feel really good about it, and a month later, you'd be lucky if anybody remembered anything from it. But when we changed to Thrive, we ditched the mission and vision statement, and we moved to an invitation. And I think it's important as a leader, whether you have position or influence, to be thinking about what's your leadership inviting people into, right? So as a business, we're inviting people into some kind of work. So whether it's a dishwasher, as a manager, as a CFO, what are we inviting someone into? And if we're about human thriving and flourishing, I really think at the core of that is when people can understand how their life makes a difference. Because when people believe their life doesn't make a difference, that's where you really see the beginning of the road of despair and isolation, right? And so we have this opportunity to bring people in and say, okay, here's how you make a difference in this operation of a restaurant, right? As dishwasher, if you're not here, we can get about 2 turns to the restaurant and then the whole thing grinds to a halt, right? As a leader, your opportunity to invite people into this mission, to communicate to them, make them seen, help them grow, be there for them. We can talk about what those things are, but then we also talk about, hey, when you come into the restaurant, you have an impact. It either gets better or worse when you get here, right? So your life matters to your crew, and your life matters to this community. We sum it up most clearly inside of Homegrown, where you see cultivate kindness on the wall. And when we're doing training, what we talk to people about is, hey, in the first half of someone's days, that's when we catch them. And if we treat them with a little kindness, a little something unexpected, it may be a smile, it may be your tone, it may be your just spirit of hospitality, it may be picking up their tab. But if you pour a little kindness, wherever they go next, whether it's with their family, their coworkers, their friends, they're more likely to treat them with kindness. And that's the flywheel we feel like we have the opportunity to create with that brand. And you get nourished along the way, right? But what are we doing? What are we inviting people into that's beyond slinging eggs? What are we inviting people into beyond riblets and tacos, right? And that's what changed. When we changed the way we talked about it, it didn't matter what people's faith background was. It didn't matter what their home life had been like. This spoke to people's souls and their sensibilities to be like, well, I want to make a difference. And I want to be a part about helping other people make a difference. And then with that, we had to figure out how to empower them to do that. The other 3 things a lot of research says about human flourishing and thriving is the idea of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Those are the 3 things. So I've talked a little bit about purpose, but the idea that you're trying to help someone create mastery, that they can leave knowing that they're really good at their work, right? And then they can earn the autonomy that we all like to be able to make decisions and move around. And so we talk a lot about that. We have 3 values. Not that I'm going to take you through Thrive orientation here, but respect, respect, results, and relationships. Respect about how we treat people and the human dignity and seeing people as humans and not as inconveniences, and results. If we're not producing results, we're not creating opportunity for people, and we're not helping them develop mastery, and relationships and the importance of having healthy relationships and reconciled relationships and how you handle those things. And then we have 4 mindsets I won't walk you through, but that's how we frame up thrive. Okay? But at the core, I want to talk about one last key mindset for us and for me as a leader. How many people in here ever knew Marvin Martin in town? Anybody know Marvin? Yeah, so he's really one of those spiritual kind of great-grandfathers now of Wichita. He was a labor attorney and then retired and has wrote a lot, and he passed away in his 90s here a couple of years ago. And Marvin was a mentor of mine, and though we had a long, I think it was 50 years between us, he made an incredible impact in my life. And one of the things he said after his wife of 60 years had passed away was that he'd realized something, that all in his life and the people around him had always assumed we were in the land of the living and you go to the land of the dead after you die. He goes, I'm actually looking around and everything around me is in decay. Right? I don't look how I used to look. My fence doesn't look, my car, right? Disease is the normal, disappointment. So we're actually in the land of the dying and we have to go to the land of the living. A real deep spiritual truth, right? But that flipped something on its head for me because I'd been, as a 3, a guy who was going to go change the world, right? I'm going to go out, light it on fire. I'm going to put a dent in this place. And I heard that, and I realized that I was constantly disappointed because I thought I was supposed to get this place back to the garden, to utopia, where there was no hunger, and there was no poverty, and there was no unreconciled relationships. And we'd make progress, and we'd lose ground, right? And then I was like, oh my gosh. If the norm of this world is death and decay and disease and disappointment, my invitation every morning from the Lord is to be the exception. I have the opportunity to come into this world and bring a little more light, not a little more darkness, to bring a little more kindness, to bring a little more joy, right? A little more love. So that's what we talk about in our business. I mean, through the pandemic, it was super powerful. As people were feeling the stress inside of restaurants, and you couldn't do things right for everybody. Some people wanted to be tighter, some people wanted to be looser, and some people were belligerent. I mean, we had a person in West Wichita show a gun to a server. It was crazy times. And we said, hey, this is your opportunity. You can tell the world's stressed right now. Now you can bring in more light, you can bring in more love, you can bring in more joy versus taking it out. And I get up every morning, feel a deeper connection to purpose as a leader and as an individual than I ever have. And I get to invite other people into that. 8,000 of them, plus the 6 at home, right? And that will work through my whole life, no matter what titles or positions I hold, if I don't hold any. The influence I have is to bring love and light into people's lives. And the people that have won in my heart have been the people that have brought light and love and have earned influence and have been able to steer my life, right? And so inside of that, I guess really I have a lot of different places I could go, but I guess the invitation for you is to do the inReach, right? Through a lot of my Christian upbringing, it had only been about the outreach. And I realized the key to outreach is inReach. I got to keep one in myself to Jesus. And I have, the measure stick for me is actually the more dependence I feel and less independence on Jesus. And the more independent I'm feeling, the further I'm straying from the way. And so I want to encourage you to get people in your life that are thinking this way, to be open. That's another part of the secret sauce, is having people that you share life with and that you walk with, that you can share who you want to become with, that can help you with that. I got a group that I meet with every Tuesday morning. Laura and I have couples in our lives that help us move in that direction. I have a team at work that we share these things with, that you can't go alone. And what we do and what we say is when we're going out, so I was out in the field this week, and the last thing CFO said to me was, hey, go love the people, right? And there's nothing that sums up what we're trying to do more than that. So that's my journey through business. All that stuff's true as I lead higher ed, and I get to love the 6 university presidents, public university presidents, or whatever it is. It translates to getting involved in my kids' soccer teams and loving those kids, up to any title or position in any city, county, or state, or country, right? Real quick, I wanted to take questions from the group. Tim, how am I doing on time? Do you want me to just wrap up, or do you want? Okay, and you guys just shout them out. You don't have to pass the mic, though, unless the camera needs. I'll repeat the questions so the camera can hear them. Does anybody have anything specifically they heard me talk about they want me to unpack?
Toughest lesson you learned in business?
Toughest lesson I learned in business. What I mentioned earlier in going through the closing of those restaurants and feeling like that might be what defines me was realizing that I couldn't let what other people thought about the business or myself determine on what I thought about myself, right? I need to know I'm a son of the King. I'm loved. I'm Becky's brother. I'm David's son. I'm Emma's father. Like, that's who I am. And if I fail at business, because I'll tell you, in Pizza Hut, we saw a lot of people in the right place at the right time. They got a brand that you could not lose with, and they became millionaires, thinking they were the smartest people in the room, right? And I've seen some of the smartest people be in bad industries at bad times and fail, right? But if you were picking one of the two of them for your team, you'd pick the person who failed. And so you just can't let that, because you're going to have failures and successes in life. And I think that was what really, for me, because I just felt the weight of all that. I called every manager the night before. I happened to be up in Hayes closing that one. And that's real lives and real people. And I still carry it with me today in every decision we make, that we don't want to end up in a position like that again, because it hurt real people, you know. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am? How do I balance family and business? Not great, probably is the answer. It's gotten actually a lot better. There's a couple helpful thoughts. One is to not try and keep it balanced every day, but to think about it in seasons. So there's sometimes when we're opening a restaurant, we're pushing, I may have to be on the road a lot for a season, for a couple of weeks, for a month. And then I need to think about it in terms of the next month. How do I tilt it more towards home? Does that make sense? The other key for me is when I'm home, how do I not be on this, right? Because I still work anytime I'm doing this. And so trying to make sure I'm with and honor my kids and my wife with my attention when I'm with them and when I'm home. And then trying to make sure I'm particular about spending one-on-one time with them. And quality time's not high on my love language list, and so that's like a real choice for me. To be able to do that. And then every once in a while, I'll do a time kind of worksheet. There's a name for it, but a time study of where I'm spending my time. And am I thinking I'm working 45 hours a week? I'm really working 60, or am I, where am I at? We try and keep it in that 45 to 50 range generally. So, anybody else? I know we've got, yeah.
What do you see in Wichita, and what do you need help with?
What do I see in Wichita, and what do I need help with? Well, I'll tell you, so Ryan Beatty and I were at a meeting this morning, the Greater Wichita Partnership, and it's a real exciting time to be in Wichita, Kansas. And I'll tell you a comment I made in there that I'll say to you is what I feel like is changing in the city is we're moving from victimhood to why not here, right? And so you're seeing that inside of businesses, inside of our political leadership, inside of the people. And it's from that spirit that you see things move. And this city moves really well when the county, city, and business community are all kind of like equal legs of the stool. And usually we've had one of those legs be wobbly at different points. And I'll tell you right now, they're as strong as I've seen them in my 20 years of involvement in the community. And so there's just real opportunity. Kansas is healthy, the city and county and the business community, and we've got leaders leading UST 259, leading WSU Tech, leaders at WSU that all are pretty humble leaders and care more about advancing the community than advancing themselves. And that's also another key ingredient to the soup of communities thriving and growing. So we're right. I think next 3 years are going to be a real exciting time to live here. Yeah. Anything else? I'll tell you. Yeah.
You're not in a place where you can do what you do forever. What is your approach and goal? It's like the next generation, the next leader, the next me, all those different roles. How do you approach those?
Yeah, it's a great question. So he's asking succession planning and what happens if I'm leaving, how am I thinking about all that? So one of the things I was going to wrap up with, and I'll pivot to this, and if you have a question, I'll come to that. But so some of you know, but not all of you know, about 7 months ago, I went in for a routine CT scan, having no symptoms or anything, and found a tumor about that big over my spleen. And it was totally, divine intervention, I believe. I'd had written down for 4 years to do an executive physical, and I built a house, and the guy across the street was a concierge doc, and I thought, well, it'd be cool to have my doctor across the street, and hey, will you set me up for an executive physical? I'm never going to leave town to do it. And it just happened that then, and I'd almost done it 2 years earlier, wouldn't have seen it. And this tumor ended up being a paraganglioma. Once it metastasizes, it's got, my 5-year survival rate would have been 10%. The thing was huge. It's usually about that big up in your neck. There's only about 600 of them a year in the US. So 6 months ago, had an operation where they cut me open from here to here and took that thing out along with my kidney, which had totally enveloped. And here I am today. So I thought a lot about succession. And I'm proud to say I have this thing on because I went yesterday up and got my 6-month scan and it was clear. So, praise God. So you guys aren't done with me yet. But anyway, so I had to think about that, right? And so I've tried to build a team and empower them in a way that if I'm gone, and I was gone for 2 or 3 months, and it took a long time to recover from that. And the business ran fine, right? And some people, that makes them feel insecure. It made me feel great. And it made me say, okay, well, what should I be doing? Like, should I be, people have this near-death experience. My heart almost stopped 3 times on the table, ended up back in the hospital with collapsed lung and pneumonia the week after. And really dodged a lot of bullets through this thing. Should I just work 10 hours a week? Because now I know I can let the business run and just be full-time with kids and wife. Does God have a special mission for me now? I need to go find it and go work 80 hours a week at that since he just bought my life again? And I realized the truth is somewhere in the middle of that, right? And I felt like the Lord, so another mentor said to me just a month ago, made a lot of this make sense. He said, early in our spiritual journey, it's a lot of going to the Lord and saying, Lord, what do you want me to do here? What should I do here? What do you want in my life? And what you see in the scriptures is as you become more spiritually mature and the Lord really trusts your heart, the questions flip where the Lord's saying, well, what do you want to do here? And I felt like about 3 days before my surgery, the Lord asked me, well, what do you want to do here? You ready to come home? You want to stay? I'm like, man, I know the Sunday school answer is I'm supposed to want to go to heaven, right? And but I want to stay here. I want to be here for my kids. I want to be here for Lauren. I just feel like my work's not done here yet, and I felt like the Lord honored that. In that moment, like I had done everything. I got to my wife's friends and said, hey, tell her to remarry if I don't make it. I'd sat down with my whole estate planning and Lauren and said, here's what I want to happen. I sat down with the leadership team, said, here's what I want to happen. Here's what you can expect. The last thing I hadn't done was written notes to each of my kids, which I was going to do. And after that moment, I was like, I don't need to write the letters. And inside of that, then he's saying, I felt this mentor was saying, because I was wrestling with all this, saying, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to run with the business. And I really have kind of looked at where the business now is kind of a completion of what I dreamed about 11 years ago. And I felt like just here in the last month, that's flipped to saying, hey, why don't you look at this as a new beginning? And let's see what the Lord wants to do with that. Whether, Becky and I's parents never put pressure on us to be in the restaurant industry. That's why she had ended up in marketing and PR, and I was headed to LA, and none of my 3 cousins had any interest. We usually heard about the worst parts of the restaurant industry around the dinner table. I forget where I was going. Oh, and so I don't plan to put a lot of pressure on my kids around it. There'll be an invitation if something they're interested in. But what it's about is developing leaders, and as we grow, creating opportunity for them because of what we do. And so always trying to identify and have active conversations about how people need to grow, what they need to do, and seeing kind of how that elevates. And we'll probably actually go through major reorganization next 30 days to reflect some of those changes. So. But it's been, I'll tell you, inside of that actually, it's not just about finding the right people, but as the leader of the organization, I've had to change my role in some pretty big ways at different inflection points. And one of those was like, I'd grown up, my dad and uncle knew every GM, every middle manager. They were in every store at least once a year, oftentimes 3 or 4 times a year, and that was my standard of excellence. But once we got over 100 restaurants, if that was the standard of excellence of the CEO, we were done growing, right? I don't want to be so many places at once. So letting go of some of what I had seen lead to success to make room for maybe a different model, a different way of being was really important for me. And so since I'm only 44, I haven't gotten to a lot about thinking next year, but it's been important for me, for the business to grow, to make sure that I'm willing to grow and change my style and change my definition of what it means to be a successful CEO. Okay, there you go. You okay? Do I need to get the okay? Yes, sir.
Got one more.
Yeah.
What does communication with your team look like?
Okay.
And how many people do you have under you? How do you manage everything?
Yeah, so communication with the team, we do, during COVID it was weekly and now it's quarterly, but we do a quarterly conference call with all of our general managers where we talk about the business and we open it up for questions, so kind of have a town hall. And we run a really open company. Ask any question you want, we'll do our best to answer it. And then we've now had to move, because of our size, to an every other year meeting where we pull all the general managers together. And then we have, so we'll pull them all together in September in St. Louis. In the off years, we pull them together in smaller groups. We think it's important because these people run essentially individual $2 to $3 million businesses, to pull them with peers, remind them they're not alone. So we really try and make sure we're pulling them together a lot. And then we have a newsletter, but then we think about the communication in each of those individual restaurants, right? So how do we celebrate when people are doing things right? Because it actually changes behavior. So in every Thrive restaurant, in the back, there should be a recognition board, and we have these cards and people recognizing their own teammates, the leader recognizing people when they see them doing things right. So you think about communication in those little hubs, and from me, I just try and be available. I try and show up, and I try and make sure that when they have me, they can ask me anything they want, and they can be clear about where we're going, what we're doing, what our expectations are. So, but I'll just wrap up and saying, hey, it's a privilege to serve the Lord and to be loved by the Lord, and He loves all of you. And you guys are invited to the same journey that I'm in right now, which is to learn how you're loved, how you're broken and how you need that love, and to wrestle with those things, and to win yourself in those ways, and that's what's going to change your leadership. It's been the inReach that I've been willing to do that's had the impact more than the things I've dreamed up, if that makes sense. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'll be around if anybody's got questions after. Thank you guys very much.